Julie, I know
Yep.
that the PowerPoint says in the chat, but since this is a smaller group, do you want to just go around or?
Yeah, I think it's really nice when we can go around and hear from everybody. Katie, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm Katie Hudkins, and I'm also the other co-chair with Julie of this committee. And I also own a childcare center in Kitsap County in Bremerton, Treetop Village. A favorite game playing as a kid. We are a dice family. We play lots of dice games. We bring dice camping and on the airplanes and just various dice games. So yeah. Erin, you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Erin Kerrigan. I am the interim deputy director of community engagement here at DCYF. I'm currently located in Seattle. And my favorite game to play as a kid, I don't know if this counts. It's not like a board game, but I was obsessed with Double Dutch as a youngin'. And I actually, last summer, one of my girlfriends and I decided we wanted to start doing it again. It's a hot mess in our late 30s, but it's still just as fun. It's hard.
All right, Sandra, you want to go?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sandra Nelson. I'm located at Prem ABC Child Care Center in Southeast Seattle. My official role is director. Yesterday I was driving the van, so whatever. Favorite game. I grew up in a family that loved to play games. So we would do Scrabble, Monopoly, anything where you can beat somebody else. Let's see here. Matt, would you like to go?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Judge. I am in Seattle here. I'm the Federal Initiatives and Collaboration Administrator at Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And my favorite game was a card game called Cribbage. Let's see. Just going down my list here. How about Dawn Seward?
Hi, I'm Dawn. I'm at Edmonds Lutheran Learning Center, Edmonds. I am a director here, and my favorite game to play as a kid was Rummy. Our family played Rummy a lot as a family, just a fun activity to do. And Hillary?
Hi, I'm Hillary Prentice, Sammamish Montessori School in Redmond, and I am a committee member. And let's see, games. What came to mind for me was like tag and hide and seek. I really loved just the freedom of being able to run around the neighborhood. I'm lucky to grow up in a place that was normal and you could just go and be gone for a few hours. I know that's not typical anymore these days, and I find that to be a shame.
Okay, how about Debbie Groff?
Well, thank you. I'm Debbie Groff, and I'm with DCYF. I'm an area administrator with childcare licensing, and I also oversee the outdoor nature-based childcare licensing process. And that is kind of why I'm here today. Erin invited me just to listen in and think about how outdoor nature-based needs to be probably represented in this group, and looking forward to getting some folks maybe coming this direction. But I am located in Walla Walla, and boy, I had so many favorite games, and I think a lot like Hillary. They're outdoor games. They're things that we used to do playing in the neighborhood, a well-protected street. So we played a lot of kick the can, right? And we were just set free to just run and play, and parents didn't know where we were, but we all made it home safe for dinner. So I yearn for those days to come back to our world, and hopefully we can create those little pockets of space for kids to do those types of things again. And I can't see everybody's name, Julie, so if you want to just call on somebody else, that'd be great.
Sure. Susan?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Susan Brown with Kids Co. My role is the founder and CEO of Kids Co. located in Seattle. I thought of outdoor games too. So we had a corner that we set up a baseball diamond on. So I guess I would say we played baseball on the street, probably like we shouldn't have, but that was what we did and it was a lot of fun. Thank you. And let's see, I'm supposed to call on someone else. So, hey Lois, how about you?
Thank you very much, Susan. My name is Lois Martin. I'm located in the central area of Seattle. I'm an owner director of a licensed center. So my favorite board games as a kid was either Uno or Pit. Went to college and learned how to play spades and backgammon. And then my last one would be, I think the one that was probably the outdoor one was we built go-karts using, old bike tires and that type of thing. And being the only girl amongst a bunch of boy cousins at the time, we would play SWAT. If you guys remember how SWAT was popular in the 70s, and we'd run around arresting each other. It was hilarious. So yeah, I'm sorry, I had a whole litany, but those stand out for me and still make me smile. I'll go with Nicole Rose.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicole Rose, and I am in Olympia. I'm the Assistant Secretary of Early Learning at the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And I love all of the games that I'm hearing. I love playing cribbage. I also really liked playing Clue and a game called Othello. So lots of fun things. Glad to be with you all today.
Rebecca?
Good morning, I'm Rebecca Lee, and I'm located in Spokane, and I'm the owner director of 3 sites over on the east side of the state. My very favorite game, I lived in an apartment building growing up as a child, and so there wasn't a whole lot of action that I could play. So my favorite game was Jacks on the kitchen floor. I'm not sure who's already been called on. Eric, have you already gone?
I have not. Thank you, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Fontaine.
Oh no, Eric, you're really breaking up.
I am in Lakewood on the community engagement team and my unstable internet, of course. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
great. Okay. My favorite game as a kid was America's Pastime, baseball. Played it from a young age, and then even as an adult, I've gotten a couple wood bat leagues. So, still love it. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just gonna read real quick. Okay, it says Rachel Wessel, member of Provider Supports Committee, owner director of Fountains of Faith Children's Academy in Lacey. Favorite game was Canasta, Grandma taught me. Matt did say it out loud. G. Hirsch, Seattle, director of Discovery Montessori, monitoring now while hosting a screening session. Oh, okay. Let's see, we've had a few more people join. Yvette, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Yvette Irvis, she, her pronouns. I'm the Chief Program Officer at Wellspring in Seattle.
Do you have a favorite game from your childhood?
Favorite game? I would say Jacks. Going way back.
Sure. Amy Russell.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Amy Russell. I am the DCYF Early Learning Division Deputy. I'm in Olympia. My favorite thing to do when I was young is roller skate, but truly my favorite game was a dice game called Yahtzee. I don't know who's left, Julie. Is there anybody left on the list?
It's okay. And Shalia, are you able to unmute?
Yes, I can unmute. I'm in Leavenworth with my kids, so I'm in my pajamas still, but trying to rest for today with Tiny Tots. And I am not a game player, so game nights I just sit over and watch people. I never could play dominoes, spades, nothing. I couldn't figure out all the rules and stuff like that. So I just sit around and watch everybody else.
That's funny. Okay, Katrina, Brooke. Are you able to unmute? Otherwise, I think that might be everyone. Okay, so.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there we go.
Oh, and what were we talking about? What we liked as a child?
Yes, if you could introduce yourself,
Okay.
where you are located, and then your favorite childhood game.
Okay, so I'm Katrina Brooke. I'm located in Woodinville, Washington, on the east side, real close to Redmond. I'm the director. I've been the director at the Shine School for almost 21 years. My favorite game as a child was a little unusual. I particularly enjoyed catching gardener snakes and climbing trees. So we would race the gardener snakes. We'd catch the different colors. And I had a lot of baths as a kid because my mother would say I stunk to high heavens when I came in from playing outside. So I've got lots of scars from being a kid, from coming out of walnut trees that were way too high to be up in. And so my knees are pretty beat up.
Hey, thanks for sharing. Well, I think we've hit everybody. No, there's someone named Jen. Jen, are you able to unmute and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm in Spokane, director of Crayon College. And I had to be in the hospital for a month because I broke my arm. And I remember playing Chutes and Ladders like nonstop. And I always won, but looking back, there's no way I won that many times. I think that they were definitely letting me win. So I'm gonna have to say Chutes and Ladders.
And I forgot, Jessica Spencer.
Morning, everyone. Jessica Spencer. I'm on the community engagement team here in Spokane, Washington. And first games that came to mind were outside kickball and capture the flag.
Okay, well, copies of the last meeting, the minutes were sent out ahead of the meeting. I'm not sure if everybody received them. Is that something that can be shared in the chat, Eric? Also, the feedback document. Oh, great. Okay. Jessica shared the meeting minutes. So if you guys want to click on that and look it over at all. See if we have any questions from the document. There were still a lot of questions about the grant on the meeting minutes. Okay, now the feedback loop is in the chat. Okay, and in that feedback loop, there's a letter from Frank Ordway about the staffing at the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice.
And just a little note on that, that write-up is going to be kind of the premise for what Frank's going to be talking about today. So if you want to take a minute to review that, and if you have any questions that come up from it, Frank will be here shortly and we'll be able to answer those for you.
Oh, and I wanted to mention that our final topic of the day was meant to be presented by Travis, who has emailed and said that he's sick. So we'll have a little time after lunch to talk about some of the licensing things that y'all are experiencing, whether it's a CPS investigation or licensing investigation. We can put together a list of things to send him before he comes next time, but we will be ending a little early. So does anybody have questions from the letter from Frank? We want to make sure that those are noted somewhere.
I didn't realize there was 5,000 employees. Reading the letter, I learned that.
There's time right now because we don't move on for another 9 minutes. So I don't know if there's, if that's something that Nicole, you're prepared to talk about. It's a good question from Hillary. Or later, if you want.
Oh, no, sorry. I just was looking for the mute button. I apologize. Yeah, I'm happy to share more about that. And then I know Matt is on as well. And so if there are other things he wants to add, Matt, please feel free to do so. So we were a successful applicant of the preschool development grant. And so that is about $4 million. And it is really meant to build upon the work of the previous preschool development grant. And then also look at some of our work related to family engagement that we were doing through Help Me Grow. And really try and think about how we make some more connections with Help Me Grow and Child Care Aware as it relates to the Paid Family Medical Leave Act. There is some pieces that were in there around the scope of our play and learn models that we do with Child Care Aware and our Family Friends and Neighbors Network. So there's some child and family pieces of the grant. And then there are some pieces that are really related to workforce support. And so the grant also asks us to build upon the work that happened in the early learning coordination plan, which I know Tracy has come and talked with this group about before. And so we'll want to build on that needs assessment. And then what we're also really going to be looking at is how do we look at ways to really increase the economic viability of the early learning workforce and that model. Really thinking about what is it that is needed around business supports for childcare providers, and then continue to look at some of our systems around data systems and multi-level tiered systems of supports, such as the pyramid model through our partnership with OSPI. And so when we submitted the grant, it's sort of some initial thinking and that had been built off of conversations we had, but I know that I believe there are plans, and Matt's gonna correct me if I'm wrong here, to come back and have some conversations around implementation.
That sounds right to me, and I couldn't say it any better than Nicole did, except to add that I'm happy to provide a summary of what the grant covers and what our application included.
It looks like someone named Nicholas has joined us. Are you able to unmute, introduce, and tell us your role?
Hi, yes, I'm Nicholas Colgan. I'm staff to the DCYF Oversight Board, and just here, just observing, just listening in.
Okay. We also did favorite childhood game, if you have one.
Ooh, Mario Kart.
Okay.
Julie, I have a quick question about the preschool grant and the analysis. And I just was wondering, Nicole, I mean, as you all know, right now facing our legislature is a bill HB 1550 that's about transition to kindergarten. And I'm curious how, like, when you're applying for funds like that and knowing that this other thing is coming, will there be analysis on the impacts of preschool in the childcare sector in the work that you're doing with regard to this grant?
That's a great question, Susan. The grant is actually really focused on supporting workforce in general and looking at some very specific pieces related to engagement in some of our informal care settings, such as play and learn groups. We did not have built into this what's the analysis around expansion of really what are two entitlement programs, so transitional kindergarten and state-funded pre-K on the child care workforce. That was not built into this grant. I think from DCYF's perspective, we want to make sure that as we're thinking about ECAP entitlement and those pieces, we've certainly had a long-standing history of a mixed delivery system, and so wanting to continue that.
I'm hoping to have some, we can talk about that during the lunch, but Susan, if you wanted to take a minute, because we still have a couple minutes, 4 minutes, if you want to take a couple minutes and just share what the amendments to 1550 are that are causing concern. Not everybody has TK in their area, but they should still be aware of what's going on.
Sure. Just the way the bill is written, it would take transition to kindergarten out of OSPI, and it would not, out of basic ed, which means that there wouldn't just be regular funding associated with that, and that there would be, by taking it out of basic ed, the legislature would have to appropriate funds, and then schools would have to apply to be transitioned to kindergarten schools, so that we could not let the enrollment in those programs run amok like they potentially can if they stay in basic ed. So unfortunately, the amendments that have come out, which is a little bit surprising, but maybe not, they're collective or collaboratively designed or written by OSPI and DCYF. And basically it defeats the amendments say, leave it in basic ed, and don't hold public schools to the early learning standards that licensed care is, and also open up after-school programs and wraparound services for TK programs to Working Connections childcare. That's the best that I can explain it in this short amount of time. I might not have it perfectly right, but the gist of it is it's raising serious concern amongst the childcare community about the harmful effects of transition to kindergarten not having the barriers and guardrails that are included in the bill as it's written.
Right. My understanding was that they are asking for these TK programs to be able to get subsidy without the early achievers rating system, right?
So if I may, I think that piece is not quite accurate. I think that, so when entities are accepting subsidy, they do have to be licensed or certified for payment only. And so I just want to be clear about that. I think there's some question and conversation around government licensing other government entities. And so I think that's part of what you see there. But if someone is wanting to offer childcare and they want to offer subsidy, they do have to be licensed or certified for payment only.
Lois asked if DCYF is supporting the bill. I would ask if they're supporting the amendments also. I think the amendments were co-written, were they not, with OSPI and DCYF? Aaron is going, yep.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I would just note is that we know that we are still not yet serving all children and families. And so I think this is an opportunity to think about how do we really partner with the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction? How do we think about the quality work that has happened so well in both our childcare and state-funded pre-K world? How do we build on some of those successes to think about how we continue to serve more 4-year-olds as we're talking about transitional K or transition to kindergarten? That really is the age group that they are looking at.
Right. And I do want to have further discussion about this, but we do need to move on. So I'm going to throw it over to Katie.
All right, so for the next session of today's meeting, with what we already saw in the feedback loop, we do have Frank Ordway coming on. Is he on, Julie?
Yeah, he's here.
Okay. All right, good. Hi, Frank. So we're so excited to have you and have you update us on what's going on with the operational plan and the RESJ. I think right before you got on, I was so surprised to see that you guys have over 5,000 employees. So that's exciting and something new that I learned today. So I'll let you take over. Thanks.
And it's great to be here. I know there were some folks who heard this update yesterday. Maybe I ought to have them do it first and see see how much they remember from yesterday and how accurate I was. Before I dive into it, as was the case yesterday with the ELAC meeting, there are a number of faces and folks here who I used to see a lot and I haven't seen in a couple of years, and it's just really good to see you. So sorry that we're not in person. Sorry we didn't have a chance to hug or at least acknowledge each other after a couple of years of not seeing each other. But Julie, Susan, others, it's great to see you. Hope you're well, and look forward to the conversation today. And hopefully it won't be quite this long before I get a chance to be back. The role I'm in now, Chief of Staff, I started right at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's a distinctly different role than the one that I had before. It's a lot more internal and other agency focused than provider focused. So this is, it's nice to be here. I'm here to provide an update on the agency's Office of Race, Equity, and Social Justice. I want to back up just a little bit before diving into those specifics and talk about, these efforts are largely why this agency was created. And so while and one of the very first efforts I undertook when I became Chief of Staff was to create this office. We had a number of people in the agency who were already leading from where they sat and were really driving the conversation, really holding us accountable to both our creation, but also who we needed to be. And so those folks helped me form the original Office of Race, Equity, and Social Justice, Yvette Jasper, Day Shogren, Latoya Holmes-Ware. And they came into that role at a time when, a lot of state agencies were starting to invest in this, but, maybe they would have one person, as a director of an office, but not a lot of support outside of that. We tried to do things a little differently. We created a strategic plan that's anchored in social justice and race equity. And so we really tried and are putting forth effort to make this more than a checkbox, but really why we're here as an agency. Since our creation and since the creation of the Office of Race, Equity, and Social Justice in our agency, additional things have happened to support this work in our state. Most importantly, the creation of the Office of Equity in the Governor's Office. And governor's offices, there's governor's offices for lots of things, and some of them are effective and some of them aren't. From where I'm sitting, this office is one of the best supported enterprise offices that we have, whether they are in the meetings of the cabinet or sub-cabinet that I get to take part in. The support, the expectation, the responsibility for state agencies in this arena is made clear. And that office is doing a lot to provide us as agencies resources to do the work, but also laying out some pretty important and well-rooted goals for us, in particular around community engagement and co-design, and the state government's expectation that going forward, that when we propose a new policy, we propose a bill, we propose a budget item, that if it proposes to serve a community, if it proposes to make something better for a community, we have to show our math that we actually worked with that community to develop and design that proposal. And that's a significant shift for state government. And it's going to be one where gatherings like this become even more important, and additional gatherings and connections with community become more important. And so this is really exciting to have this level of support. It's also something that those of you who are providers and activists know at times it's not, Aaron notwithstanding, not what we're necessarily gifted at as an agency when it comes to, we have calendars, we have responsibilities, we have rules we have to follow. And sometimes those things make authentic community engagement and partnership difficult. And the support and the requirement and the expectations that are being set now is for all of us to put forth the effort to turn that tide, and it's exciting. And so we're going to need your support, your continued holding us accountable to it as we go forward. But also your partnership in making it happen. And so it's exciting. We do have in our agency, we have an Office of Race, Equity, and Social Justice. It currently has 4 staff members. It is soon to have 6 or 7, depending on how some of the budget stuff works out here in the near term. At that point, it will be the largest office of its kind in state government, and it will be the first one with a seat at the executive table. We hope that that helps increase it was one of the lessons learned from our first, from the creation of our first office, was tighter connections with leadership. Presence at leadership was really important. It might seem like a silly lesson to have learned, but it's one that we have learned. And so it's very exciting to have this group in place. And they are now working on not only getting to know their new positions, because many of them are new in these positions, but the entire agency, the entire leadership team, our direct members, the pair members that are part of the effort out of the governor's office, all of these initiatives we are doing our best to weave together to support our staff in this work and to continue to move issues of race, equity, and social justice forward. We are an agency that has inherited systems that are riven with inequity. Child welfare has a long and unfortunate history in communities of color and in Native American communities as being used as a weapon against them. We run a juvenile rehabilitation system that is part of the criminal justice system, and we all know, and at least should know, the disproportionality and rampant discrimination that has taken place in the criminal justice system. You all are in the middle of an early learning system that often relies on people that should be paid a lot more than they are to do the work. And so we're exploiting an entire workforce of women and people of color to deliver services at the most important time in a child's life. So we as an agency have got lots of places where we can put our effort, pull levers to try to undo this history, and not to just stop doing the wrong thing, but to actually start doing the right. And this office is a key component of our agency's commitment to that work. It's not up to this office to solve that problem. It's up to all of us. The people that are members of the leadership team, like Nicole and myself, have distinct responsibilities over the divisions that we run to be individual leaders on this count. We as staff on an individual level have responsibilities. And we're doing our best to support our staff through both training and other kinds of engagements and supports to drive and support this conversation internally. The state has a newly revised array of trainings that are just coming online now. And we're working very closely with the training enterprise, DES, in our state on those trainings, but also designing what we need to do internally to support them being successful. So it's not just a compliance exercise where people go sit on Zoom and take a training and then they're done. What kind of conversations are we having before, during, and after those trainings to support their impact and their amplification? And then through our affinity groups and other things internally, how are we continuing to push and continuing to support the individual journey of our staff, but to make sure that while we are here, that we are making as much progress as we can across all of these fronts. It's a lot of work, but it's the most important work that I'll ever be a part of, that's for sure. And so it's exciting to be part of. We work with agencies from a lot of other states. We share a lot of information and unfortunately at times casework. And when I meet with agencies from other states and people that are in similar positions to mine and talk about this work, the one thing that I'm really gratified by is that in some of those states, they have to talk about this in whispers. They have to talk about it in the shadows. We're here working for this state where I'm sitting now. I don't have to. The expectations are much higher. The governor is supportive. The legislature is supportive. The courts are supportive. The federal government is supportive of our efforts. And so this is really about the hearts and minds of our staff. We're not fighting against other, we don't have other things keeping us from doing this work. That's both liberating and challenging at the same time, but it's a better place to be than we are in other states. And so I feel a distinct, and our teams feel a distinct responsibility to make as much progress on this as we can while we have this opportunity, because elections can change things on a dime. And so it's a really exciting time for our agency in this work. As I mentioned, we have a new team coming on. We've got 4 new staff members there. We have a couple more that will be added to that group. I think, Aaron, we talked yesterday about having, this is another group that they ought to have some intersection with. And so as we think about future agendas and future discussions, in addition to being on, coming back to ELAC, coming to this group makes sense to me as well. We go through, I see some questions. I want to make sure I get back to them here. Let me get back up. I'm going to do my best not to drive into TK and that bill, even though it's killing me a little bit, but I'll stay out of that conversation. It was nice to listen to when we started. Let me scroll here. Frank, on that front, is there any analysis being done to ensure that TK are not adversely impacting? I don't think that we have, Hillary, data on that level of like what's happening in the workforce just yet. It's a great question and one that we're going to need to watch. One of the things that we do hear from our K-12 partners is that they do view this as as all of the on-ramps to becoming a certified teacher are being altered. You know, it wasn't that long ago that you had to go to just a couple of different teaching programs in the state to get a credential. Now there's other kinds of community-based pathways, and a lot of the pathways from paras to be the teaching core. I don't know if there's evidence of it yet, but there is a suspicion and a hope that those things are on-ramps and levers that help diversify the teaching core in general. And so we would hope to see that here. I don't know, Nicole, I don't think we have any evidence at that granularity on the workforce at this point. Certainly not in TK because they're not ours, but that's a great question. And I don't think we have that level of granularity to it yet, Hillary. Sorry, I don't have more information there. What does your office look like in terms of diversity? So I don't have everybody's DNA test in front of me for the new office, folks, but I can say that we have people that represent a lot of different kinds of diversity in the office now. We've got, whether it's race, sex, personal history, and lived experience, tribal affiliations. And so we're doing our best to not only find people that have the experience, but who can reach and be heard by a community. And not to put too fine a point on it, but that ain't me in many settings. And so we're doing our best to make sure that we have people who have the experience, have the commitment, who raise their hands to want to do the work. And so again, when Carol and Ray and Alita and Jazzy get a chance, you'll get a chance to meet them and they can speak for themselves there. Who holds this group accountable? Great question. This group reports to the chief of staff, my office, which is one of the members of the executive team here at the department. The leadership table, which is comprised of all of the assistant secretaries and directors of all the major offices, is really leaning into their responsibilities and helping shape and craft what they and this agency need from this office. And so while they report directly to me, this is a leadership team and secretary level office. So they're kind of responsible to all of us. And I would also flip it a little bit and say we're responsible to them, which is, as an agency with a cornerstone of a strategic plan that has race and equity as its underpinnings, we all have really complicated jobs and lots of pressure and responsibilities that come with it. Lots of calendars, laws, legal requirements. I get a meeting with the governor on Friday. He's all mad about some lawsuits against our agency. It's a delightful job. And sometimes all of those other pressures can sway you, can take your focus, can, I've got things I have to do that are on a schedule. This office has always helped us raise our eyes a little bit and get out of that mode of just chasing the calendar and recognize what our long game is. And so I think that the accountability here goes a lot of different directions. They're accountable to me on some things. I'm accountable to them to support the work, to support the conversation, to make sure that I'm cajoling and working with the rest of the members of the leadership team to make sure that this work is taken seriously. And also, I would say the accountability runs, we have a lot of accountability from the governor's office, as I mentioned, from the Office of Equity. And we have a responsibility to work with them that what they give us and ask of us is actually doable for the agencies. And so the accountability of this one goes in all directions. And I think that's the only way we're ultimately going to be successful in undoing the 400 or 500 years of history we're trying to take on here. It's all hands on deck rowing in the same direction. And it's hard, but it's the most important work that we can do. And we are starting to see in some of our systems the results of those commitments, the results in our changes in the way we approach background checks, the way we do different things in child welfare and in JR. We're starting to see some real results. And so I hope that those aren't just blips, that they're actual trends, and look forward to reporting on them as time goes on. But we are excited to see some really important underpinnings that are shifting in terms of disproportionality in some of our systems, and we hope that that's permanent. Julie. Oh, you're on mute, Julie. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. You were very, I think, instrumental and very present when this group formed, the original group, LCAS. And I understand you're in a different role now, but I will say it has left a big hole. And so I'm hoping that we can get you to maybe twice a year attend this meeting. And also, I appreciate the update on ResJ. I think with so many people leaving or left, and also, we had a bit of a similar situation in community engagement. I'm wondering if you can reassure that community engagement is solid, not going away. There's a commitment to its growing, all of that.
Thank you, Julie. And we have had turnover. We're a state agency. We've had turnover both as the result of the vaccine mandates where people made personal and other decisions. And it was, no matter how you feel about it on a personal level, I will share something with all of you, given my history with some of you. It was the most wrenching experience as a manager that you could have imagined. We also work in really, really tough subjects. And so we have turnover. We have people that leave to go with other agencies, people that come here. We joke as I meet with other agency leadership that we're all playing a lot of musical chairs with talent as people are moving from one place to another. So we do our best to learn from those experiences where staff are willing and able. We do, exit interviews and try to learn as much as we can. We're also starting to implement some stay interviews to try to get ahead of some of this as best we can. But your direct question, Julie, about, I'll start with community engagement. Our commitment here is firm. There has been turnover and people that many of you worked with for a long time, had a lot of trust in, and I can understand the disquiet that creates. But the agency's commitment is high here. And I would say that the commitment that we are being asked to do and required to do is being increased when it comes to community engagement and the notion of co-design and partnership in the development of policy funding and everything else. So I think that you're going to see, I hope, and I was noticing in some of the notes coming into this meeting, the tracker of the requests on WAC changes, I believe, or what was that, Aaron? I didn't dive into it deeply, but there was sort of a request change thing being tracked there, correct?
Yeah, that's tracking the recommendations contained in the temporary licensing subcommittee recommendation report that they'll be tracking.
Okay, so I think that having, your expectations of us having systems where we are able to show you where your suggestion came in, what's being done and what's the result of it, like we need to continue to work on that cycle. Because I know, Julie, since you and I met, the desire to change or argue about certain WACs, like that process needs to continue to be transparent. And I think the community engagement investment will help us there. And so we're not reducing the staff number in this group. It will actually be going up. And I think we'll continue to refine our approach to it as we go forward. I think one of our struggles, and I'll just be honest with it here, I mean, besides just being state government, where you struggle with this stuff in general, as much as it breaks my heart, it's true, is that we have requirements to talk to a lot of people. And so this group has a really important role in this landscape, as does ELAC and others, but we're going to be required to broaden our engagement as best we can to, you know, more individual providers, more parents, and more. And so I think it's an important thing to know that there's not going to be one group that's the arbiter of our community engagement in these spaces. We're being asked to really broaden our engagement. So that means amplifying and strengthening these groups, but it also means that other voices will be asked to come to the table as well as we can. So I hope I answered that question.
Frank, you might not be able to see my hand because it's.
I can see it, Susan.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. I have two questions for you. The first one is, you know, you talked a little bit about the diversity of the staff, but what I was curious about is in the letter that you wrote, one of the goals isn't to continue to diversify and have the DCYF staff at all levels represent the communities that you serve. And so I was wondering why that's not a goal. And then my second question was, you talked about internal accountability between the levels of government and so, but what about external accountability, accountability to the people, accountability to us, the transparency that is not necessarily there that to engender trust between we the people and the governmental entity. And so where's that accountability built into the system?
Let me take on the first part of that first, Susan. It was an oversight if it wasn't included in the letter. It's a key part of the internal strategy of the agency, and we're looking at everything from our hiring practices and where we have disproportionality taking root in the process. Also, just how we're reflective, not only at a global level, but you know, Katie mentioned, you know, that we're nearly 5,000 staff, and so we're statewide and we're all over the place, and so our regional offices we should reflect things statewide, but our regional offices in particular should really reflect the regional variance and whatnot there. And those are things that we're digging into, both in hiring practices, retention practices, and the whole ball of wax there. And it's and I would say that, you know, 10 years ago, the attractiveness of state employment was higher than it is today. And so our need to become a better employer, a more intent employer about how we recruit and how we retain and how we treat the staff that are coming. The notion of coming to work for state government for 35 years and then leaving really isn't the model anymore. And I honestly think that's a huge gift. The ability to have a lot of fresh air and fresh oxygen into teams and new people coming in, I think is a positive, but it means we have to be a different kind of employer than we've been. And a lot of that goes to what the basis of your question was are we looking to recruit and retain people that are actually reflective of the communities in which we're working? So a couple of concrete things we're doing there is a lot of combing of our job descriptions. If something isn't a qualification that's really needed, we're removing it. And so if you're doing a certain kind of job and we're saying we need a master's degree, do we really? Looking for ways in which not only the qualifications, but the description of the job has more people see themselves in it. And we're supporting our hiring managers in not over engineering their pools, do more interviewing, have larger pools and shorter processes so we get more people in. So you're not just reading somebody's resume and anchoring your bias there, like let more people into the process. And so those are some of the tactics that we're pursuing, Susan, on that front. And it should have been a stronger part of the letter that I sent if it wasn't. On the second part, in terms of trust, that's a complicated question. I can remember when I first transitioned from advocate to being a state employee. And I walked into a coalition meeting of early learning providers and activists, of course, that I'd worked with for a decade. And I realized as I walked into that meeting that morning that I was on the other side. And it was a distinctly painful experience. I was like, these are my people and, you know, my friends and my allies. And suddenly I'm the guy who's not being transparent and they can't trust anymore. And so it was a distinctly painful personal experience. But I think, Susan, your point we are a regulatory agency that licenses and pays people. There's going to be moments where we disagree and we have rocky moments. Our need, however, to be transparent and clear about why we make decisions, doing our best, and this is something we struggle with because we get calls from whether it's the feds or the government or the legislature to tell us to do something by next week. And our ability to engage authentically in those moments is hard. And we don't always do it with as much grace as we should. I think these groups are an important part of that accountability circle, calling us out when we don't. I mean, we're here. And so that I think that these groups are an important part of that. You know, I could say elections, but I realize that those are distant levers for many. I assume a lot of you vote, but in terms of really like holding us accountable for a poor decision in a whack or whatever, that's a distant lever of accountability. So I think that continuing to invest our time together in meetings like this and gatherings like this is a big part of that circle. Your continued engagement with other parts of state government, both legislature, the governor's office, and others, that where you have an opportunity to voice your concerns about our decisions is a responsibility that you all have, and that's a part of the accountability circle. I wish that I had a crisper answer. It's a really it's something I struggle with because I know how hard my teams and my staff are working on your behalf and on the behalf of citizens of the state. I also understand that we frustrate you. And so continuing to try to just keep the conversation going and continue to explain and continue to refine the way we approach things is the best answer I can give you. I wish I was smart enough to engineer something more elegant, but I'm not sure that I am.
Thanks, Frank. I appreciate it.
But you asking questions like that's part of it. And it's a necessary, I mean, the decisions we make impact you as business owners, impact the families that you serve, impact the way which you can hire and retain people, and the care that we need to take in that is something that we're still learning about. And I think we're still learning about, I don't think we're learning about our responsibility because I think we understand that we have it. I think we're still learning. I think it's fair to say, as I'm looking at Amy and Nicole in particular, we're still learning about how to best support these markets. How do we support? Because I think for years the approach was, well, we send out some money and we license. We weren't taking the responsibility for the actual existence, the thriving and the sustainability of the services that we rely on to protect and serve our families. And I think we're still growing into that responsibility and learning about how best, when we do those other things, how best can we behave with the goal of sustainability and availability of these services. And I think we're still maturing from regulation and licensing into that space of how do we actually help these services be available. And we've got some growing to do.
Well, I will say, Frank, that one of the things that childcare has always been very good at pulling the rabbit out of the hat. No matter what rules came down on us and how much it costs and we made it happen. But we don't have the bandwidth or the resources to pull the rabbit out of the hat anymore. And that is one of, I mean, but it's sort of like we are having to adapt, but it doesn't feel like government agency and is adapt. We thought muscle memory would change because of the pandemic, but it feels like habits are going right back to where we were pre-pandemic when we can't do that anymore. So I just wanted to just lay that out there for you, Frank, to understand that conditions have changed dramatically. Resources have dried up, even with the support of the funds that we've received from DCYF, which are greatly appreciated. We know that providers continue to close their doors. And then with other things like TK coming down the pike or changes in licensing, all these things, we are the ones who have to walk the talk that you guys lay down on us. So I just want to, I can't emphasize enough that we need you to change and adapt to the new conditions of the world that we live in and not continue to do the same thing that's always been done because that's what you know or what you're used to. So anyway, thank you for the opportunity to at least bring these points forward and for your response. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Susan, and we don't have a ton of time. I know my time's kind of running out here and want to make sure other folks get a question, but I'm Susan, I'm happy to talk about that stuff anytime. I know I can remember very clearly when we first met and the struggles you had then, and they are very different now. And so I think it is important for me to hear directly from you on those things. So thank you. Angelia, see your hand up?
Yes, I would just like to add in that it would be, I think, refreshing to have a way for us to check back in. I'm super excited about the opportunity for this department. And I agree with you that in Washington State and specifically in Seattle, we can talk about, diversity and equity and, not be scared. We gonna, scare somebody to death. And that is some kind of boogeyman term that we're talking about, but that it really is a realistic thing that we should, as a nation, be moving towards and not be scared about it, because it makes us all better. But I'm concerned that we get these exciting opportunities and then we don't check back in to say, are we meeting the mark of what we said we wanted to do? And especially with community, because I want to hold you all accountable for whatever measures you think you should have in place, and maybe whatever measures we think you all should have in place. But if there's no way for us to do that, then it just looks like it's lip service. And I'm too excited about the opportunity for what this can do for it to just be, a lip service. So I'm just throwing that out there, that I would hope there's ways for us to be able to engage with this new department as it is taking shape.
Thank you very much. While we are able to talk about it a little bit different, as I referenced and you support there, I also want to make sure that I recognize here that just because we can doesn't mean we don't have a lot of work to do. And the commitment that we have and those feedback loops that you just asked for, I think, are really important. We have some areas that we are measuring ourselves here. We should come share them with you. Are we measuring the right thing? Are we looking at the right thing? And then also come back, as you say, and actually support, where are we 6 months, where are we 1 year, and have that cycle. And so Aaron and I can talk a little bit about that. And, Julie, you asked for, whether or not I could come more, and I'm happy to make that commitment. And I think that maybe anchoring my occasional visits here once or twice a year around, here's what we're planning to measure and here's where we are. And you all can ask leadership those questions directly, whether it's about workforce, whatever it is. I think that might make some sense. And so we can work through that cadence and make sure that those are meaningful engagements. Because I know that we have a lot of work to do. It's important I have a lot of work to do personally. Our organization has a lot of work to do, our state does. And so having an opportunity to come back and see how I'm doing, we're all doing, I think is an important part of that accountability loop that folks are looking for. So I'm happy to make that commitment. And you and Aaron and I, we can talk about the pace, but I think that the data and also communicating with you sooner rather than later about the areas that we're focusing, just so you know what they are and you can comment on them and see where we may have missed the boat, is an important loop for me to work on having and closing. So I'll commit to that as well. And thank you. It's great to see all of you, at least somewhat, here in these little boxes. I hope that at some point as time goes on here, our travel budget is fine. So maybe we can get together in person at some point. I know we're all awfully used to not going together, but I'm sure we all miss the potato bar in Yakima. So we can get together there as quick as we can. Thank you very much. And Susan, ping me. Let's have a cup of coffee.
All right, thanks, Frank. I'm kind of a newer face to you, and I'm excited to, be alongside Julie and, communicate and see you in another 6 months or so here at our meeting. So
great. Thanks for the work you're doing, Katie. I know that you've got a busy job running your business and getting into this. So thank you for your commitment. It's part of that. You're part of it.
Thank you. Yeah. So I mean, it's why we're all here. It's why we're all here on this meeting. So yeah, so thank you.
Great.
The next presenter is Aaron. So if you want to take over, Aaron.
Sure thing. And just give me one moment. I had to kind of restart some of my programs here. I'm almost back in it.
We're going to be going over the work plan for the next year for these meetings. So if you guys have topics, this is the time to bring them. And then also, although we're at lunch from 11:30 to 12:30, I want to mention that Nicole Rose has agreed to come back at noon to answer questions about TK while we're on our work session. So, sorry, go ahead, Erin.
All right, so like Julie said, we're going to be discussing the 2023 work plan. And I know I'm a little bit of a broken record on this part, but there's never a bad time to share feedback with us on things that you would like to see on the work plan. It is a living document, so while we do a lot of work on the front end to plan ahead, obviously things come up and change throughout the year. So it's a living document, and there's never a bad time to submit feedback for that. It's something that we review and discuss with the executive committee between every single meeting. So just want to put that out there. So Frank kind of gave a little bit of a preview of, he called it out, and the doc was in your prep email as well, the TLS recommendation tracker. So that's where we're going to start the conversation. And then also we will hold some space just for general feedback if you guys have extra things that you want to add. But maybe, let's see. Do we have, okay, great. So Jessica just dropped a link in the chat to the TLS update template. So I just wanted to give you guys a little background on the purpose of this document. So as we all know, recently the FSKA Temporary Licensing Subcommittee completed their work and submitted their recommendations. And so internally, we've been meeting with licensing to discuss how we as an agency are going to be responding to and following up on the various pieces that were included in those recommendations. So the template that you see that's kind of our draft template for how we are going to be tracking these items and providing regular updates. So basically an updated version of this tracker will be shared with ELAC and provider supports on an ongoing basis throughout the year so that you guys have a way to track all the moving pieces, with the recognition that with all of those items, you know, there's just no way that all of that can be added to the work plans for ELAC and provider supports and be given, you know, enough time and attention to follow through on every single item. So that's going to be kind of our baseline for how we as an agency are going to be communicating with you guys and how the members are going to be able to track these moving pieces and flag things that may be priority, if that makes sense. The first thing we're going to do today, well, first of all, I wanted to just hold some space if you guys have any questions about this tracker template, if you have any feedback on it. And then what we're going to be requesting you guys to do is to spend some time reviewing I think it's 35 total recommendations that are listed in that tracker. We have a SurveyMonkey link for you guys, and we're going to be requesting that you review all those items and select 3 to 5. I want to at least 3 to 5. If you have more than that, that's totally fine. But you know, we're just hoping to get at least a good handful from each of you about the items on that list that you would like to prioritize to be included in the provider supports work plan for the upcoming year. And some questions came up about this yesterday, so I just wanted, when we did a similar exercise with ELAC, so I just wanted to clarify that the ask isn't necessarily like which of these items are the most important, right? It's the ask really is which of these items should be prioritized to be part, like a full agenda item for a meeting for the work plan. there's probably going to be a lot of overlap in those two categories, but I just wanted to put that out there since we did have some questions about that yesterday.
Can someone screen share and put them up on the screen?
Sure, I can screen share the tracker that I have. Can you see it?
There's a lot of questions, and you want us just to pick 3 to 5?
So what we're gonna have you guys do is we have a Survey Monkey link that you guys will be
I'm on the
Oh,
survey.
okay, great.
I see so many. I'm like,
Yeah, there's a ton. Yeah, there's a lot, which is really why we're kind of starting here and just asking, like, trying to get a feel for what items should be prioritized.
A lot of them are really, really good. It's hard to just pick 5, but okay.
Yeah, and you're not limited to 5. I'm hoping for like 3 to 5-ish, right, from each person. If you have 7 or 8 that, and you can't narrow it down from there, that's totally
really good points. Really good points.
Mm-hmm. And some feedback that we got on the tracker yesterday that we will be adding to it is because you might notice as you review some of these items that some of them are pretty simple, right? Straightforward suggestions that could potentially be just addressed internally, right? With just some internal changes or additions. And then other things would need like legislation and a little bit more robust work around it. So that we're going to be adding a column that's going to kind of indicate those to kind of help as these things are tracking through. So I just wanted to share that, but that's also a consideration.
So I see some things on here that have been wanted by this group, this Provider Supports Committee, for a long time, like a Provider Bill of Rights document. Another one that we've discussed a few times is the rulemaking process and the petitions, and that's at the bottom. I guess I'm wondering what happens to the rest of these if they don't make it on the work plan?
So whether an item makes it onto the work plan or not is not going to impact, the agency continuing to track and respond to each and every item. So if you'll see in the tracker right here, it says accepted, yes or no, right? So if there are items in here that the agency is not going to move forward with for one reason or another, then that will be indicated in the tracking sheet with a reason why. For example, like if there's a recommendation that would put us out of compliance with federal regulations or something of that nature, and the agency's not going to act on that recommendation, then they would say not accepted, and then cite the federal regulation that is the reason for that decision. And that's why I also kind of called out the living document piece, because as we progress throughout the year, not only are things that may not be captured on this list might come up, and we want to remain flexible for that, but what is a priority and what topics members feel need to be addressed, that might change based on the information and the updates that you guys receive, right? So if there's something that's moving along that seems like there might be a good opportunity to collaborate on, we might want to scoot that one to the top of the line. So if any of these items are not included in the work plan, that does not mean they're just off the table. We're going to be continuing to track all of them.
I think this looks great, Erin. I mean, if you're the one who created it and I just did the survey, I think this is a great way for everybody to kind of, quickly come to, what's most important to all the providers moving forward. So great job.
I can't take credit for this. Eliza took the lead on getting this put together, but yeah, I think it's the best way to make sure that none of this falls off our collective radars. Like Julie was saying, a lot of these items are things that have been discussed before. And I think that this gives us a good framework to kind of start making some progress on those things in the coming year.
Erin, this is Sandra Nelson. If there's some items that are on our list for recommendations that we have questions about, can we just shoot them to you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So we did add like a free write question at the end of the Survey to capture any questions or comments, but you can also share in the chat or just unmute. We have about 15 minutes, but also the SurveyMonkey link is not going to expire at 10:30, right? So there'll be time. But yes, if anybody has any questions about those, I can't guarantee that somebody on the call would be able to answer that right away, since I don't believe we have anybody from licensing on the line, but we can certainly capture those and add them to the feedback.
Okay. It was interesting. This is Sandra again. It was interesting because I was looking at some of the recommendations that would probably fit under the hat for new hires. I mean, there's like 3 or 4 different things that we probably could put together as concerns for new hires, requirements that licensing has put there, which I thought would make it easier. But I got to the one about the greater reliability, and that kind of threw me because I thought that was a teaching strategies gold requirement for ECAP providers. And I didn't know what that had to do with the rest of the providers in the state. So things like that is just the questions I was wondering about.
Sure, yeah, we'll capture any questions shared verbally or in the chat or in the survey and follow up on those. So yeah, if you have any other clarifying questions or comments, then please feel free to share those. And now that I'm not screen sharing, I see some comments. Yes, Lois did call it. There were some edits. And then, yes, sorry, Lois said that there's one other added column that ELAC requested, which is adding a column to indicate timing for expected action or implementation, hoping they can narrow it down to like a quarter when possible. So that will be added to the template as well. And then Susan with a good question. If a recommendation lands in the no column, is that just for the work plan or does it mean no period? So if you're looking at, anything on the tracker, that is the agency response to that recommendation period. So that the tracker itself does not impact the work plan, if that makes sense. That's just going to be an internal, that's just going to be a tracker of the agency position and status on each recommendation itself. Does that answer your question, Susan?
Yeah, but so if we disagree with the result, what is the appeal avenue? Because obviously then what if it's a no period, but we feel strongly that it not be a no, what's the process for that?
So I would say that process would be similar to, the process we do now if there's an agency decision that there's questions about or need further clarification on. One advantage to having this tracker, it's essentially like its own like kind of self-contained feedback loop for the TLS recommendations, right? And one benefit to having this tracker be part of every single meeting is just like with the feedback loop, there will be time at each meeting for people to review it. And if questions come up, then they can ask them, right? So, what that looks like is probably going to be really different depending on the nature of the request and the response. But what I can commit to is that we will have that opportunity to receive those questions every meeting, similar to the feedback loop.
Erin, did you say when the kind of collated responses from this survey would be shared? I may have missed that when you were talking right away. I apologize.
I didn't share that. Thanks for asking. So we will, I'm trying to think of what a reasonable timeline will be. Definitely by the next meeting, because we will be using this feedback along with feedback previously given and yet to be given, and kind of use that to construct a draft, the bones of the provider supports work plan. And then we will also be collaborating heavily internally to get input from the divisions and things like that. So, but you will have an updated draft to review that will include the feedback from this in the next meeting.
Perfect. And can you remind me too, how the work plans are year-long, 2 years long?
So they're 1 year long, and we're in the middle of transitioning from calendar year to fiscal year.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so the upcoming work plan is for fiscal year 24.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. If there's no other.
Well, we used to have a list of topics that have come up that haven't been completed or discussed or whatever. So do we have that list so people can weigh in on work topics for the upcoming year, other than the licensing stuff?
So we will have time for addition, we're not just collecting feedback on the TLS piece. You're free to share any other work plan suggestions. We did briefly go through that exercise, I believe, in December, but the previously unaddressed items from last year's work plan, there just wasn't a lot to work with there this round. We did share that, but I don't think it was as constructive as it has been in years past. But I can draft up something and send that through if it would help people kind of make some suggestions. We can send that through. All right, I want to be mindful of time because that is kind of a lot of stuff to look through. I know that probably the people on this call are more familiar with the content on that tracker than most. But if we want to just take a few minutes, the SurveyMonkey link is in the chat. And feel free to unmute if you have any further questions, but otherwise we'll just take some time for everybody to fill that out.
So with Travis not coming today, and we did not have a presenter from CPS that was able to come, which is something that this group has requested over and over, that we have both licensing and CPS so that we can talk about licensing investigations versus a CPS investigation, what providers can expect versus what is actually required. I think it's really important that we keep that on our work plan, hopefully for our next meeting. I know other topics that have come up in the past have been around merit, around early achievers. I mean, this is, you guys, if you have topics that you want to have brought to provider supports, this is the time to share that. I don't think we have a Menti link, which is unfortunate today, but you could certainly put your topic in the chat.
And we can send one through with the follow-up, Julie, also to capture that. And I'll also make sure we include the feedback that we already have received, like the topics that have already been suggested from previous conversations. But we will definitely share that in the feedback loop. I mean, sorry, in the follow-up email, so everybody's up to date.
Has everybody been able to do the Survey Monkey? Okay, no. Michelle, it is in the chat. And it's just pertaining to the temporary licensing recommendations, so that we can prioritize which ones come up on our work plan. But again, we're not limited to having only those topics on our work plan. If you have something else that you want to have discussed. And then also remember at 11:30, from 11:30 to 12, we are at lunch, but bring your lunch back to the Zoom. Providers are going to have a time for discussing whatever you want to discuss, but hopefully we can have some time to discuss the licensing investigations and CPS investigations and what you guys have experienced so that we can send some of those over to presenters before they come next time. And then of course, Nicole Rose said that she would join us at noon for questions around TK, the transitional kindergarten, which may not be in your community. It's not in mine yet, but everyone should be very concerned. There have been communities where providers have shared that they have lost most or all of their preschool children that were enrolled in their programs to transitional kindergarten opening up in their area. And they're trying to figure out how to stay open with just an infant and toddler program. So. Questions, topics, we just have a couple minutes left before we move on to the 10:30 section. Looks like no, we might as well move on then. I'll send it back to Katie.
All right. So the next session is DCYF, the Early Learning Division Structure Updates. We will have Matt Judge and then Rachel Brown Kendall, hyphenated. And they're here to provide us with an update on the early learning structure, what's going on in their division. So Matt or Rachel, you want to take it on?
Hi, everybody, I'll get started. Again, my name is Matt Judge. I am the Federal Initiatives and Collaboration Administrator. And joining me today is Rachel Brown Kendall, also known as RBK, our Quality Recognition and Improvement System Administrator. And we just wanted to provide information on DCYF's Early Learning Division structure and our recent reorganization, and kind of orient you to the goals that we had for that, and get a little bit of feedback from you about naming one of the important teams that was formed under that reorganization. So just to give you a little roadmap here, I'll provide an overview of the Early Learning Division and the recent reorganization, the 4 division areas that were created, and then I will turn it over to RBK for more detail about the different teams, programs and initiatives within those areas. And then she'll take us through a survey around one of those team names. And then there's time at the end for questions and hopefully answers. Next slide, please. So this reorganization of the Early Learning Division was effective October 16, 2022. And we, as I said, reorganized with 4 key areas with the goal to help our staff and ensure children, families, and providers get what they need when they need it with more clarity and fewer barriers. I would say that conversations toward this reorganization actually began a year earlier when the division was first forming. We knew that we needed to look at ways that we could break down silos between different programs, initiatives, and teams to better support collaboration, innovation, aligning some of our programs, all with the goal of making things easier to navigate for providers and children and families. And so the reorganization is really a culmination of those conversations and that work, but a part of a continuing process to address those goals that I just mentioned. So next slide, please. These are the 4 areas. I'll just give a broad overview and then turn it over to RBK to kind of fill in any blanks with more specifics about the teams that are kind of working under these 4 areas. But up at the top left there, you have the child and family access area. This is bringing together child and family facing programs to improve the experience for children and families. And this is including, but not limited to, early learning settings, eligibility, and enrollment processes. There on the lower left, you see the operations and provider supports area. That includes daily operations to help minimize duplication and increase our division's efficiency. Think of HR, finance, facilities, safety, communication, contracts as they face providers in our field. And so we have up there at the top right, we have a really crucial team who's it's a challenge to bring all that work together under one name that resonates. So we're interested in your perspective, more on that in a minute. But this area brings together systems and services around quality, teaching and learning, workforce data, and other supports for providers, business owners, and families. So you'll hear in a minute about kind of the teams that maybe had been separate or located in different parts of the agency or the division that came together under that. And then last but not least is a small but mighty area. This is my area, federal initiatives and collaboration. This is bringing together cross-sector and cross-agency collaboration and coordination with our federal partners to strengthen our early learning system. I guess I just emphasize the federal partners point there as kind of an organizing principle for this group. So this brings together the work that is in my portfolio around Child Care and Development Fund, along with other federally funded initiatives like the Preschool Development Grant, which we talked a little bit about earlier, but also the Head Start Collaboration Office. So those are the broad 4 areas. And on the next slide, I will turn it over to RBK to flesh this out a little bit around the projects and initiatives under each.
Thanks, Matt. So thank you for having me. I always love coming to this group and seeing so many faces that I recognize and names that I recognize. And it's exciting to see new names and faces too, because it means that the group is changing and growing. As Matt said, we've been underway with this work for quite some time. And I think you could even go further back to when DCYF was created as an agency and the purpose behind bringing together these different parts of what had been DSHS with the Children's Administration and the Department of Early Learning and Juvenile Rehabilitation, and bringing those together to create DCYF. The purpose was to make things better for kids and families from birth to 25. And when we first started out as DCYF, our leadership, they had been doing a lot of thinking about how to bring that work together in a way that made sense. And we were trying to do something different. And so we ended up having a different structure. And what we learned is, hey, you know what? That's working, but it's not working as well as it could. And so that really was an impetus for us to think about how might we bring these teams together and bring together what had been the early learning programs team with the eligibility and provider supports team to create this new early learning division, which Matt has just laid out for you. And I think something that is important to note that although we have these 4 kind of categories of work or buckets of work or work streams, these are very much integrated across this division, and that the leadership have very strong working connections with each other. Funny, no pun intended about working connections, child care subsidies. We have strong working relationships with one another, and not just within our division, but with other divisions across our agency. Because we all are driven to continue to improve our services to kids and families and providers like yourselves. And so, Matt talked about these 4 different buckets and gave you kind of the purpose. And as you look at this slide, you can see what really falls into that may have a greater impact on you as a provider. So when we think about operations and provider supports, for us as staff, we're thinking about how are we streamlining our processes internally around our HR work and our communications and our contracts. But for you, this is where the provider grants, where our provider payments are happening, where the healthcare benefits live. So this is how it connects to your work. With the child and family access, Matt talked about how this is where we're thinking about how are we improving those family-facing programs such as Working Connections Childcare Subsidy and Early ECAP and ECAP and Eclipse. And so that's the connection to you as providers. Like, we're bringing those pieces together so that we can have a more aligned approach in serving families. We're really trying to think about things, not just in terms of like, how do we make it easier for us? Because that's fantastic as a state worker, like, yes. But the end of the day, what we really want is for families and for providers to have a system that is easy to navigate so that kids get exactly what they need. So Matt talked about his federal initiatives and collaboration unit. So we've got the Child Care Development Fund. Some of you may know that as the CCDF, our Head Start Collab office, and the Preschool Development Grant. And again, those are places too where we continue to see those connections, not just within the Early Learning Division, but across our agency. And then of course, the last group, which is nearest and dearest to my heart, because this is where I live, is we jokingly call it the Dream Team. This is where we have brought together what had formerly been the professional development, workforce development team, and the early achievers team. And the funny thing about this is that, and any of you that are, well, probably all of you can relate to this, but it's really hard to think about quality improvement without also thinking about some level of professional growth, professional development, workforce development, accessing training or coaching. And so Angela and I, our teams have always worked very closely together because QRIS and professional development go hand in hand. But what we are doing here is something so much bigger than just training and QRIS. And so we have really been thinking, I mean, all along the last years, we've come together as this early learning division, but even more so in the last several months as we have brought these two teams together. It's not about just a merger. It's not about one team taking over the other team, but it's really about coming together and creating something new in service of making things better for providers so that things are even better for kids and families. And so you can see here in this new team, we've got quite a bit of work that happens here. We've got early achievers happens here. We've got our merit team is here, professional development work, workforce development, childcare business supports, electronic attendance. I mean, the list goes on. You can see all of that. And so we've really been discussing our identity and what is it that we do. I mean, yes, we've got some labels here, but how do we show up? And what is it that we are striving for as a team? And so we've had conversations with our contracted partners and conversations with our own staff teams around what this work looks like and who we see ourselves as and what we want to be. And so we've had a lot of conversations over the last several months and have played around with different activities to help us dig into what our identity is, including creating word clouds with our contractors, doing the same thing with our own teams, and then digging into the activities that we really want to engage in. And so we have for you today, I have a link I'm going to drop in the chat here that will take you to a survey that shows kind of the evolution, I guess, of what we've been thinking about in terms of our own identity. So I'm going to drop the link in the chat. So before I forget. So there's that for you. Excuse me. Thank you for advancing the slide. I appreciate that. I don't know what the, I don't know why it came back weird. Anyhow, so in this survey, and I should open it up on my screen so I can show it to you. Can I share screen? Let's see. I cannot share screen, but let's see, maybe I can in a moment. There we go. Excuse me. So I'm assuming that you're seeing this screen that's got the big green background. Okay, I'm seeing nodding. Thank you very much for that visual cue. So we have integrated our professional development and early achievers team. You've got the PowerPoint that shows you all the different work areas that are happening there. But what we are interested in is just getting a sense from you all, I mean, as consumers of the work that DCYF delivers and thinking about how you've engaged with us in the past, and thinking ahead to the future about what you would like to see. What name best describes and resonates with you with the new combined professional development and early achievers team? And so we've got a couple of options here. We've got professional growth, quality, and innovation, professional growth and innovation, quality practice and professional growth. And then of course, there's always the other. So share your creative ideas with us. And then if you had to choose one name that you think best describes or resonates with this new combined team, what would that be? And then you have an opportunity to, it's kind of like ranking your choice of picking. If you had to just choose one, what would it be? And so we are just inviting you to engage in this creative process with us, because it's always nice to have multiple perspectives as you're thinking about your work. And so I believe that the community engagement team will follow up with sending this out to the group so everybody has an opportunity to chime in. It shouldn't take you too long, luckily, since there's only 2 questions, but we would just love to hear from you about your thoughts related to our new team's work and how we identify ourselves. I'm going to stop.
Is there a different way that you can share the survey? Because it doesn't work on our end.
It doesn't work on your end?
Right. Somebody says it makes you download it, and I just on it and it doesn't open.
Interesting. Well, let me try dropping the link again. It came through twice, so maybe there was one that didn't work and one that did. I don't know why it entered in 2 times. So try that, Julie, and see if that works.
Oh yeah, the other one works.
Okay, good. I'm glad. It should be pretty easy. Luckily, we're not trying to make you think too hard, but we are really interested in your ideas. So with that, I mean, that's kind of the overview of the changes that we've made. I will say that I am really excited about this. It's going to allow us to really think about more intentional integration of professional development and quality supports for providers. Which is really exciting. So with that, I guess we open the floor for any questions that you may have about our newly revised structure in our early learning division.
So Rachel, can you address the question from Rebecca?
I see the question from Rebecca. Great question, Rebecca. Rebecca states, does the new structure affect current STARS approved trainers? So there shouldn't be any impact on any of the services that you have already been accessing. This is really about continuing to improve and enhance the supports that we offer. So you're not going to miss out on anything that existed before. And whoever your contact was for any of the work that you've been doing, continue to reach out to those folks because that work continues on. So no impact to STARS approved trainers.
Thanks, Rachel.
So Rachel, I have a bit of a different question. As EA has gone through so many changes during COVID, and you guys have changed, and now there's like video submissions, I understand, and I haven't done the new rating. I'm thinking some of the folks here may have already done that. But what have you found? What feedback have providers given you about the new rating system? I'm just like, how am I going to make time for somebody to videotape other folks? So what have you heard?
That's a great question, Julie. And we've actually had a lot of really positive feedback. And I think one of the things that many providers who have completed that first step of the program profile, what they're appreciating is getting the feedback from families. That may be a place where they haven't had a lot of input before. And so that's been a real value add to folks. And, you know, this is very timely because yesterday I actually had an opportunity to go on a site visit, which I absolutely love. And it had been a long time since I had stepped foot in an early learning setting. It has been since before the pandemic. I think it was the fall of 2019 was the last time I was actually in an early learning program. And yesterday I had an opportunity to witness coach interaction with the director at this center and a few of the teachers. And they were talking about the program profile. And so being able to go step by step through the information that the provider had received from the program profile. And so for those of you that may have not participated in the revised process, the program profile is the first part of early achievers in the new quality recognition cycle. And it's a 360 interview. And so it's either completed by a self-service survey, or you can do it through an interview process. And so lead staff, the director or the family child care owner, and then families are invited to participate in this. And that is then assembled into a report that brings all of that information together. And we're hearing from so many programs, just I think appreciation to the fact that more diverse programs feel like they fit within the model. That it is affirming to them, that it is helpful for them to be able to document the places where they want to have more supports. And the program profile is a great place to really open the door for setting the stage for coaching, because each teacher in the classroom has an opportunity to state, hey, these are the areas where I need more help, and to have that partnership with the center director or the family child care owner and the coach to be able to say, okay, these are the things that are bubbling up. Let's figure out a plan for how we're going to address this with everybody. So that's been very valuable. We've also had a lot of great feedback around the videos for those that have participated in the video process. Has anybody here show an emoji or raise a hand if you've participated in the program profile or the video highlights? I'd love to have you share your experience because it's going to be way better than me.
Hey, Rachel, this is Katie. We just got done submitting all of our videos. We have 14 classrooms, infants through preschool. We are the largest school that has participated in the early adopters. And it was amazing, overwhelming, but the support was really great. I mean, the coaches and getting through the system, creating the profiles for every single classroom, having an email for every single classroom. But the staff really enjoyed being able to write what they were doing and what they liked about it. One thing we didn't get a lot of was the parent feedback. We only got a small percentage of parents to actually be a part of it. So the next round, that's something that we are going to work on. But with all the 14 videos getting submitted, we got feedback within, I think, like 2 weeks. And it was really great to see. And our early achievers coach came on site, and it was the first time she was able to see the feedback. And so far we've had a really great experience, and we're working on our second set of videos. And then hopefully we'll submit to get to our next rating of 3, just to get going. So I truly, it's so much easier than having everybody on site and everybody's intimidated and you don't know when they're coming. So I think to have the availability and the flexibility that we're able to complete this at our, if we want to, but the flexibility to just complete it and go on our own schedule and time has been really great. So I recommend it. I recommend it to all providers.
Thank you, Katie. I appreciate it. Okay, I see Dawn, you've got your hand up, and then Sandra next.
So I will be honest, when I first heard of how Early Achievers was changing, I was definitely one that was like, I was not for it. But we recently started the process and everything. We've done our profile so far. And I am changing my mind about what Early Achievers is. I was at a center when Early Achievers was first rolled out, all the toys, you had to count this and that and make sure all those things were in place and all of that craziness and all of that stress. All of that seems to be gone, and it really is much more, it feels right now much more about just support and helping teachers learn and grow and assessing the quality of your program based off your policies and what you're actually doing in the classroom versus having 3 baby dolls for every child, 5 books for every kid in the classroom, plus blah, blah, blah. Like, it's a lot of math involved in the first part of Early Achievers that just was not my favorite. So I also would recommend, if people were a part of it before and got out of it because of all of that craziness, it does seem easier now. And I would recommend going back and looking at it for yourself, if that's something you're interested in.
Thank you, Dawn. I appreciate that. And then Sandra, you had your hand up and then you took your hand down. I don't know if you were changed your mind or you're just
Well, no, I took my hand took my hand down, so I'll remember about it for it. We're going through our second rating evaluation with Early Achievers, and interestingly enough, I like the format of doing the videos instead of having people come into the center and things like that. But some interesting conundrums have come up. First of all, the majority of my staff is new. I just hired them in May, June, and July of last year. And so, you know, besides the 30 hours training, they don't have very much under their belt. Secondly, Early Achievers is requiring me to designate a lead teacher before I can finish the profiles and everything. And my staff's not there yet. I keep telling them, if I designate you as a lead teacher, you're gonna have to get in school and start working toward your credits, you know, which with them doing a new job and everything is kind of overwhelming to them. So it brought up some unforeseen consequences, as I said. We didn't realize that we had to submit all of them at the same time. So my preschool classroom, ECAP, who's done it before, has to wait until I could get my new toddler teachers up and running. So the statistically, it's going to take some work, but kudos to our Early Achievers coach. She is there for help and support. And so we'll get through it. We'll get through it.
That's great. Thank you for the feedback. That's very helpful. And then I see some questions in the chat here. Okay, let's see. I got to figure out where we are.
Well, Hillary's question is about the emails.
Yes. So that's really good feedback, Hillary. And one of the things that we have heard about the parent survey. And so so here's the great thing about the way that we have been rolling out Early Achievers. I think it's great. You might think it's not so great, but we've been doing this in phases. So bringing on one component at a time and looking at things through an early adopters lens and saying, okay, let's take this set of data. And what are we learning from participants? What are we hearing? What are the pinch points? What are the things that we can do to improve this going forward? And so the email piece is one of the things we definitely heard about. And so that is something that we're working on, trying to figure out how do we streamline that more easily? Like, is that, maybe it's a QR code or something that parents can just scan and that a site could have. So that's definitely something. So as you are participating, please provide feedback. If you have ideas about ways that we can improve it, because we are listening. That is one of the things about this revised system, is that in fact, many of you may have been a part of this process too. We really wanted to make sure that we were hearing from participants. We were hearing from people who were implementing. We were hearing from, we'd love to hear from more families, but we need to hear from you about what's working and what's not working. And without that, we don't know what needs to be fixed. Hillary, I see your human hand raised.
Hi, thank you so much. So just to follow on that, I think one of the things that is a bit of a struggle is as we're participating in all of these different things and we're trying to support our families, we still want to make sure that each program retains their independence and their own individual decision making, their own control of their own programs. And I think that where we start getting pushback and where providers really get upset is when they have to hand things off and then they lose control of their business. And, you know, we have to keep in mind that for so many providers, this is their business. This is, you know, this is their livelihood. This is, you know, they are the ones who have personal loans potentially or other things, you know, on the line. And so they need to have some assurances that they are protected. So that's, I think, where you're starting to get some of those pain points.
Thank you, Hillary. Let's see. Just scrolling through the chat here. Oh, thanks for sharing the link, Dawn, about cameras. That's really cool. Well, I'm happy to come back anytime to talk early achievers. I love hearing from providers about your own experience because that is really, that's the heart of it all.
So I'm just going to follow up with a question. Is there no way around that? The releasing of parent emails?
So the parent, the families are invited to participate in the program profile. And I wish that Dieta was here today because she would be able to describe the Cultivate process more succinctly than I could right now. But can we conduct our own surveys and provide those responses? Hillary, that's a great question. And I think that, so Hillary's question is, can we conduct our own survey and provide those responses? I think that what we want, Julie, is for families to have an opportunity to provide feedback. And so if there is a better way to get that information, if sites want to take on that, you know, if there was just figuring out what is the most effective way to reach families so that each provider can get the feedback incorporated into their program profile. And so if you have suggestions about that, as you participate in the process, if there are better ways to do it, please make those suggestions.
And Rachel, just to clarify, it's the provider themselves who's connecting with the family first to see if they're willing to participate. And then there's the process with Cultivate. So there's no sharing of information unless the family says, yep, I want to.
Yes, that is correct, Nicole. Yes.
So in the chat, Dawn said that she used a form in Brightwheel, the same questions to information. I'm not sure how.
So then Dawn will get the information from her parents through Brightwheel. It will not be a part of the program profile report.
No, sorry. So I did the question if they wanted to participate in the survey. I got the information that way from a Brightwheel. So instead of handing out the piece of paper, I just got their information that way and then added their information to the provider portal that way. So they're still getting the same survey. I just finding out who wanted to participate, I did as a form at Brightwheel.
That's a great suggestion, Dawn. You know, and that's the thing that, you know, some providers didn't want to invite families. You know, it was something that they chose not to do. And others were really eager to get that feedback from their families. So. How will DCYF use the parent feedback? The parent feedback goes back to the providers. So this is part of your program profile, that 360 interview that happens. And so there are questions about your program that families answer, so you as the provider receives this information. Of course, we can look at broad themes, and that may inform, like maybe some might help us figure out better ways that we can communicate with families about the value of high quality early learning. It may help us to understand different kind of community-based assets and or challenges that maybe if we're seeing a lot of families in a particular area are having the same kind of challenges, that might inform us. We haven't really dug into the family data too deeply because most of it is very much about your own program. But it's nice to see the match between, demographically from, looking at the staff who are working at a site and the families, and being able to see that representation match. We have a big roll up, Susan. Yeah, we can see the data in large themes, aggregate data.
Well, Rachel, this is Katie again. I think your guys' presentation was great today. Again, I'm kind of newer to being a co-chair for the Provider Support Subcommittee, and I learned a lot today, and I would love to possibly be in contact with you even more after the meeting. But I think this was very helpful, and I think for some of us who have already done it, to ask questions, and then for some of us who haven't done it and have been intimidated by what it was before and what it is now. And but it's great to know that there's the support that you guys are offering with this. So thank you guys for that. It was very valuable today for me, and I'm sure quite a few other providers. So I will hand it over to Julie for our next session.
Thanks. And thanks so much for the last presentation, Rachel. We're going to be talking about the cost of care with Matt Judge and Jason Gramenke. You can correct me if I got that, if I brutalized your last name there, Jason. But anyway, welcome, and let's hear it. I don't know who's starting. Is it you, Matt?
Oh, Jason, you're on mute.
I'm on mute. Yep, sorry, Julie, I was talking away. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Remike, Child Care Subsidy Administrator. No worries about name butchering. It's one that if you know somebody with that last name, you get it right. Otherwise, it's just not happening. I'm joined by Matt Judge today, Federal Initiatives and Collaboration Administrator, who you just heard from in the last presentation, and we're going to discuss the cost of care and the subsidy rate model and give some updates and go over some recommendations around our engagement, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Let's move to the next slide. Specifically today, we're going to discuss the purpose, the timeline, and the cost of care model, our engagement recommendation, and again, we have some time set aside at the end for some discussion and feedback from the group. And with that, I'm going to pass over to Matt, who's going to take us through the next few slides.
Thanks, Jason. So we wanted to just start off by grounding the conversation with a little background, and then the purpose for our being in front of you today. So as you may know, so to start us off, I think there's a problem that the whole state was aware of, and that continues to be an issue, that childcare subsidy rates don't cover the provider's full costs to provide high quality childcare. And this limits family access, particularly for families that are not of means. And I think Frank Ordway was alluding to some of this earlier today. So we're kind of talking specifically about that childcare subsidy world. In 2021, with the Fair Start for Kids Act, the legislature directed DCYF to recommend a model that based those subsidy rates on the provider's cost of care, whereas currently they're based on what the providers are charging in the private market. Then more recently, in December, the Child Care Collaborative Task Force released a cost of care study and recommendations for how we would base rates on cost of care. And so we're really at the point of picking up where the task force left off. And we're here before you today to discuss recommendations for how we would engage with providers, partners, tribal nations, et cetera, to further develop this model toward the goal of making recommendations to the legislature for subsidy rates for the 2025 legislative session. So next slide, please. Just to further ground the conversation and make sure that we're being clear on the scope. This slide depicts the universe of early care and education in Washington State and Department of Children, Youth, and Families role. And if you go to that sort of dark blue circle there, you see the world of licensed childcare and some of the capacity there. And then within that is the world of the child care subsidy program in that smaller light blue circle. So you can see that when we're working on subsidy base rates, we are addressing a significant part of this universe, but just want to be clear not to overstate or understate sort of the scope of the work we're engaged in and what subsidy base rates would impact. Next slide, please. And then just to kind of ground us in terms of time, you can see here in the fall, actually this happened December, the Child Care Collaborative Task Force submitted its cost study and recommendations to the legislature. And so we're kind of in this second box here, 2022 to 2024, developing actual rate model, picking up where the task force left off in terms of their recommendations and kind of turning it into an actual recommendation on subsidy rates and a rate model that DCYF would make to the legislature in fall 2024 for the 2025 session. Just to be clear on that third box there, every time we want to have up-to-date data informing our rate model. And so every 3 years, we would conduct a survey like the one that the Child Care Collaborative Task Force conducted for its study to make sure that we hear from providers up-to-date information on cost of care. Yeah, and so on the next slide, really what builds the bridge between the work of the Child Care Collaborative Task Force and a rate model is addressing two broad areas of topics that would drive costs or change what a given provider's rate might be. And I'll provide examples of these to make it clear in just a moment. But the two broad areas are around identifying and recommending the options within a cost model that would influence the provider's subsidy rate, and then identify and recommend the rate regions. And on the next slide, I can flesh that out. This is a non-exhaustive list of examples of the kinds of things that we would be working on. On the left-hand side, we have cost variables and maybe some of the more obvious things that would call to mind are, what are our assumptions around staff salaries, including the salaries of owners and operators of childcare businesses? What are the benefits such as vacation and sick days, retirement insurance, and flexible spending that we might assume in our recommendations and cost model? What are the costs of curriculum for a program? And what about parent engagement, for example, parent conferences that can potentially drive costs? So the work ahead is to kind of develop assumptions around those that would drive the recommendations and the cost within the model. Then on the right-hand side, as you're probably aware, in the child care subsidy program, providers currently receive payment based in part on what geographic region they're in within the state. We have 6 regions plus Spokane based on kind of the DSHS historical regions. But this group can really look at that and consider that and or other ways of grouping providers, such as cost of living in a given area or an area's median income, or designations such as whether an area is urban, suburban, or rural. So decisions on these things are all the work ahead of us. Next slide, please. And just to make sure that we're clear about sort of the bounds of some of this work, I wanted to talk a little bit about the authorizing environment. Those are just all the kind of authorities external to DCYF who place bounds around the work we're doing. So the Fair Start for Kids Act, or FSKA, there, you can see the specific language where they directed DCYF to develop this model working with Child Care Collaborative Task Force. And we've highlighted that they're saying that we're to recommend subsidy rates at levels sufficient to support child care providers for the full costs of providing high quality care. Just to indicate that DCYF can't unilaterally set the rates or determine the rates. We will recommend that the legislature adopt a rate model, and we'll have recommendations for rates. And then through the legislative process, those rates are actually set. Further, and the Fair Start for Kids Act makes this clear, this requirement for us to develop this model doesn't in any way interfere or diminish the right of family child care providers who receive subsidies to collectively bargain through their union, SEIU 925. So that's a separate process. And then finally, it's federal funds that pay for reimbursement to child care providers under the child care subsidy program. And so federal requirements govern some of the work we do, and we're in the process of preparing to seek their approval for our method and cost model. So that's underway. And I think that's all from me, and I'll pass it over to Jason to talk about co-design in the two main buckets that we talked about for developing the rate model.
Thanks, Matt. DCYF's goal is to engage partners and tribes to develop the rate model and the recommendations that go into the model, and to be nimble through this intensive and impactful work. Let's move to the next slide. And DCYF invites public participation, focusing on the involve and the collaborate areas of the IAP2 spectrum of public participation. Just re-emphasizing and highlighting that the decision and the final decision relies with the legislature, and we have a lot of work ahead of us to work through the recommendations. DCYF recommends working with the existing early educator co-design group in those two phases that Matt mentioned. Phase 1 is develop the rate variable recommendations, and phase 2 is to develop provider, region, or grouping recommendations. And our plan is to co-design that with that work group, and then each phase concluding with the discussion and feedback session with ELAC, Provider Supports, Indian Policy Early Learning Committee, and Service Employees International Union 925. Again, we want to emphasize that this process doesn't interfere with their right for bargaining. Let's move to the next slide. The timeline for this looks like phase 1 kicking off in the spring of 2023, and phase 2 continuing in the summer of 2023. We're finalizing our request for federal approval in late 2023, as we plan to take on the cost of care survey and complete a new cost of care survey in 2024 to meet the requirements for the CCDF plan, and then submit a decision package with all of our recommendations and updated data from the cost of care survey for the 2025 leg session through the agency's decision package process. Let's move to the next slide. I want to take a moment and share 3 slides that describe the members of the co-design work group. The first slide shows the participation throughout the state, and also the race or ethnicity of the demographic groups within that group. I'll just allow a moment for everybody to take a look through the first slide. We can move to the next slide. Thank you. This slide shows the primary language for the participants, and also the participants in the work group and where they participate in the workforce. Again, both those slides show just the variety of participants in that work group. And the last slide shows the characteristics of the program that those participants come from and the different services that they offer. Great. And with that, we can move into the discussion phase. And first, the question to the group is, we can go through a discussion either as a large group discussion, or I think we have a Jamboard put together where we can go into breakout rooms and populate the Jamboard and answer the questions here on the Jamboard through breakout sessions. And that's the question to the group is, would you rather a large group discussion or go into subgroups and breakout rooms and have discussions in smaller groups?
Yeah, I prefer the large group too. I like to hear everyone's thoughts.
I see a couple comments for large group, and I think that works. Matt and I will take notes, and I know there's other notes. I do see group Q&A. I don't want to be the deciding factor. I see several folks with large group and one person saying group. That might be large group, or maybe small group. Let's go with the large group discussion, and our focus specifically is, what are your thoughts on the recommendation? And the recommendation is working through the co-design work group and then coming back to the advisory committees for feedback. And of course, if there's any other questions or comments, we'd love to hear those as well. And maybe, sorry, Sandra.
Sorry,
I was
Jess.
just maybe we take off the slide and we can see each other talk.
I like the recommendation that the subgroup work through the particulars and getting reports back to this group on a regular basis. But I was wondering, what are you considering to be the time frame in order to kind of finish up what your final recommendation is going to be?
The time frame, if everything works out as planned, will take about the next 5 or 6 months working through the different variables and the different options. And late summer, start working towards a final recommendation. So a late summer and fall. So hopefully our plan is by fall to have things decided so we can officially get the approval from Office of Child Care that they support our plan to move forward, and then work with the following year on getting the updated data and working through the decision package process.
So one more question, if possible. I'm looking at budget cycles, legislative. So that means probably we wouldn't have anything to 2025.
Yes. That's not saying that rates don't change under the current process, and the current process is through the market rate survey, and there is information in the governor's bill or governor's budget that looks at expanding rates this summer. The key is moving from a market rate survey to a cost of care methodology is going to take some approvals, and likely the next session, the next large session, is when that is going to be able to be approved. just in the biennial process.
No other questions, guys?
Um, this is Sandra Nelson. One more question. I noticed on your slide when you were discussing the costs that you would be looking at, I didn't see operating costs in that list. Is there a reason why?
That list was just meant to look at a handful of variables that we still have a range to work through. When we got the report in December, there's a few things that are consolidated by region, but there's also, and some of those are operating costs, but there are also operating costs that still need to be worked out. And just to be really honest with everyone in the group, the biggest one is the salary, and what salary scale do we look at, because compensation is one of the biggest drivers and one of the biggest costs in this process. And that includes things like benefits and vacation days and retirement and those kind of things. But the whole model incorporates and attempts to incorporate all of the operating costs, all of the things that go into providing high quality care.
Jason, would it illustrate it more, and would it be accurate to say that the Child Care Collaborative Task Force model and report kind of already covered like rent, for example, but what remains to be answered is some of the things that we pointed out, which were a non-exhaustive list?
Yes, that is absolutely fair, Matt. I see a couple questions. I believe that the slides will be included in the presentation material that's sent out to the group. And there was a question about WACs and requirement to implement rule. There are a number of specific rules, specifically ratios and other licensing requirements that are built in as well. And so the model is taking those things into consideration. And then even things like engagement and the number of parent conferences that go beyond rule, but also are influencing our QRIS rating, early achievers ratings, are also part of those variables to discuss and try to work to a recommendation through the next year. I see a number of hands. Is that for comments or questions?
Yep.
All right, go ahead, Angelia.
I wasn't first though, but but I will go ahead. I can see Susan smiling even behind her photo that is not her. My question is this, this is very complicated. If you are talking about child care compensation only, are we talking about, because I understand about the subsidy, but some programs are mixed in with partial Head Start, partial ECAP, they're in a reduced building, they're in a free building. I just feel like it's so complicated that are you going to be able to say that this model here that is operating in this model, you know, because if you got zero rent, you're vastly ahead of people who have to have rent. How do we make sure that the legislature does not get fooled by the certain models that we have?
It's a really good question, and something that we really have to point out that is also pointed out in the December cost of care report, because the models vary. And looking at the bigger environment, we are through this process really looking at childcare subsidy reimbursement rates. And so it's that smaller population. But as you highlight through this process, it's definitely impactful for other programs, and agency and legislature has a responsibility to make sure that those rates are also looked at in other programs. And that's part of our story to tell for sure. Susan, we'll go over to you next.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Related to what Andy's talking about with regard to rent and using Kids Co as the example, we're right now, all of our programs are on site at public schools. And so when we're thinking about making plans for what could potentially come down the pike and impacts of transitional kindergarten, we're looking at facilities outside of the school district. And I know Commerce has the Early Learning Facilities Fund, but you have to have a facility identified, and it's on a reimbursement basis and so on and so forth. So one of the goals of the Fair Start for Kids Act is also to increase capacity, but it's not. So what are any potential supports that can come out of the work that DCYF is doing along those lines to support creating capacity by when you have to expand or change location as a consequence of it? So, and just to give you an example, like right now, I'm looking at a facility that the numbers haven't come out completely yet, but it's about an 8,700 square foot building costing $300 a square foot to remodel, which is an almost $3 million hit. So those are, the creating capacity is really hard. So anyway, that has to be factored into the cost of care model as well.
Yeah, I agree, Susan. And I think that's part of our recommendation and coming back and looking at where we can impact that in this process is to make sure that the rates for subsidy cover those costs and make sure that we identify the costs and all costs, including facility costs, and looking forward as much as we can on what those costs will be and by region or how, and that's where the geographic the geographic region or the provider grouping is going to be important for us as well, because those costs also vary throughout the state. Our goal is to make sure that we share and tell that story through that process as much as we can, for sure.
If I can jump in after Susan as well, I just signed a lease for a brand new site, and I know a lot of people, I've said this before, but I'm married to my contractor, so it doesn't cost as much for me to build daycares. But there's just no incentive for us to want to build more daycares for the companies that, have that goal in mind to keep expanding. And yeah, there's the facilities grant through the Commerce, and I've put in for it, but never got it. And us, as community centers, we're trying to bring in more capacity. We're trying to bring in more spots, but it costs a lot of money, and there's no incentive, there's no support financially from DCYF to help us providers expand when we want to. If we're in a spot that we're already licensed and we can't add spots, we have to go to another site. But looking at the cost of building, the cost of tenant improvements, or building a brand new building, it's a lot of us, I know, are like, nope, we're out. We don't want to deal with that. And that's why providers don't want to expand. But for us, it sounds like Susan's expanding, we're expanding. Where's the incentive? Where's the support for that prior to the subsidy rates? That comes after the fact, but, grants or, something to help the ones that are expanding and want to bring in more numbers and slots around the state.
And reimbursable is difficult. We got a $766,000 grant a couple years ago. If it wasn't for Children's Hospital fronting the bill for me, I couldn't have afforded that, because I don't have $766,000 waiting to get reimbursed from it. So that's a disincentive for a lot of centers.
Definitely understand and hear all of that.
Michelle, you have your hand up.
Yeah.
Hi, so I'm multitasking because I'm running this center at the same time. So hopefully this has not been said, and I apologize if it has. But a couple things, just questions on if it's going to be considered or if it can be considered. I noticed that when the state sets their rates during legislation, it sounds great when, well, it did this, I feel like this July was the first time it actually sounded somewhat fulfilled some of that gap that it hadn't, I've done in the 20 years I've been licensed. And however, then they hit us with the big inflation increase January 2023, and that gap went again. And so I feel like that seems to happen every time they give the legislation figures out these rates and gives a pat on the back, like, yay, we're gonna raise. Oh, by the way, inflation is gonna increase quite a bit percentage wise in January of that following year. And it's so something to consider when they're looking at these rates is the inflation increase for the future, not for right then. And I personally, I think looking 4 years, you know, what is Washington State looking at for the inflation or wage increase within the next 4 years, if they're looking at the schedule of how to structure the reimbursement rates. Because I believe, from what I understand, is every 2 years, every 4 years that they look at adjusting rates for reimbursement rates. I can't remember if it's every 2 or 4.
We have a market rate survey that we complete every 3 years, and that's on a cycle where we go out and get that information, and that gives us a baseline. But rate increases could happen along that way through based on where you're at with the market rate, and then also where the ledge is. We've had a number of increases over the last few years, but I echo your comment that those increases tend to happen after the market has shown that that's increased, and hopefully there's a way in our process where we can anticipate what those future costs are. And some of the recommendations we're looking at are trying to look and see what future costs are providers going to have and how do we base it on those. And I hear the inflation piece. How can we build inflation? It'll be interesting to see. Yeah.
Well, it's huge. I mean, I believe since 2016, I'm sorry, inflation has increased, I believe, 40%. And I'd be curious to see, and I'd have to figure it out, how much the state has truly increased rates since 2016. I do not believe it's anywhere near 40%. And you know, as a provider, it's frustrating because where does that fall? It falls on the parents, the private paid parents, but then the state wants to put out, oh, we need affordable childcare. Well, the state is the one creating the not affordable childcare by not helping. They're saying that we have to pay staff more, but yet the gap between private pay and state pay is more, it becomes wider because we have to cover costs. I mean, at least at my center, I can't compete and pay my staff who are working hard and we provide a quality center. I can't pay them minimum wage. So when there's an increase of $1.25, I have to raise their wages by $1.25, no matter where they're at, because I can't expect them to get closer to minimum wage and expect them to be providing a quality service to children and help nurture and provide education to children at minimum wage, where I can pay a 16-year-old that can go work at McDonald's. But then the state wants us to keep pushing education, and it blows my mind, you know. Anyways, so that please please write that to, I won't go into that, but please write to consider the future, not the, when you're doing this analysis, not the here and now, but that we need to look forward. Also, I think looking at discussing the impact that here soon the districts with the public school system in Washington State is going to have on the private child cares with taking preschool and TK and school age programs. That's a huge impact for us. So that's going to be, at least for my center, that's going to be a huge cost for us. So that I don't know, because I don't feel the state has been upfront about what that exactly looks like. I haven't been able to figure out how I'm going to restructure my program to adapt to that. But I know there's going to be some adapting, and hopefully we have time to do that. But that's going to affect our overhead and our costs and how we're going to run things. Because when you take away, personally, my classroom of 20 kinder prep, we call it pre-K classroom, and offer it free at the district, that's going to affect my income, my incoming, that affects how I put the outgoing. So I think considering what the Washington State School District's doing, the child care should be considered when you're looking at rates, and reimbursement should be a huge consideration. Again,
I just want to jump in. I'm really sorry. We are over time, and I want to be respectful of Matt and Jason's time. I just want to check in and see if you guys have the time right now to handle the last two hands that are up, or if we need to put this in the chat or something.
I have all the time you need.
Okay, Dave, you want to jump in?
With a bumper maybe towards 5 o'clock. I like this is definitely important for us. Like that's why we're here. So a couple more questions is fine.
Yeah, and we do need to break for lunch, but if we could handle the last two hands that were up.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Jason, I was a part of the task force for the cost care model. And I remember the last draft, we really did actually talk a lot about what people are saying here in terms of making sure that there was space in it to build in unfunded mandates from WACs. And then also really kind of looking at if you took a kindergarten classroom and needed to convert that to a licensed space, how much would that cost in construction costs, architect fees, and different things like that. And I know that I thought in the draft model that there was actually a piece in it that it would allow you to plug in those numbers. And so I don't know if that, I know that I heard you say that we would tell that story as we're talking to the legislature, but I feel like there was a place actually in the model at one point where depending on what region you were in, what construction costs are per square footage, you could actually plug that in. But I may have missed a new version of it as it continued to build out. So
I have to go back and look at the calculator. That specific, the cost of what new construction is, I don't believe is in the calculator.
Okay.
It is built down to, in this area, this is the cost for rent.
Okay.
Averaged out, taking out the folks who get rent like at a reduced or free cost. Like I can go back and look very specifically, but that's like one of those very detailed questions that we get to dig into.
Yeah.
And I think we'll have to look and see how new and opening a new center or a new home, what those costs are, and figure out how we incorporate those into the rates for ongoing. If there's a model, if there's something in there for that or not. If there's not, then we have to tell that story. And I don't know that we need to wait for 2 years from now to tell that story also, which I'm sure that many of you are sharing that story too.
Yeah.
But we'll make sure that it's incorporated.
Cool. I appreciate that. Yeah, I know it was a lot of the conversation circled around not only just looking at the cost of care of what's currently here, but if we really did want to continue to scale and make sure that we have enough slots in providers to be able to take care of all the kids that need care, that we would have to continue to expand. And I know that from that most recent capital facilities request, the amount of need that came in so overwhelmed the amount that was given out. I think it told it a pretty extremely good story about what the need is out there. Is people do want to serve more kids, but they don't have $25,000 or $50,000 laying around to put in a new bathroom, create an exterior door, and do those simple things that make a kindergarten room into a licensed space.
Yeah, totally agree. I those stories, I know they repeat themselves, and the capital investment stuff is on my fringe. I know that there's work happening there. I just can't speak articulately to it.
Cool. Awesome.
But I know there's work there happening.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
If I could ask Dave and Michelle to put your specific, I know you had some lengthy questions, but if you could put some specific questions in there for follow-up, that'd be great. Sorry, Matt.
Oh, apologies, Julie. I just wanted to reiterate that whatever work comes out of the co-design will come to the legislature as a recommendation, and they will make a final decision. So when we think about the future of cost of living, for example, or inflation, and we think about unfunded mandates, they will make the decision. But one of the things that I think that the model is a tool for is if you're going to require something of providers, what do they need to be paid in order to support that? And that's what will inform the legislature about with the model.
Thank you. Rebecca, you had your hand up. Do you still have a question?
Well, it was more of an offer. Jason, I am knee deep in building a 7,200 square foot facility, brand new. It's been framed and there are trusses. And if you need any input from Eastern Washington as to what some of those true costs are, I would be happy to share some of those, because it's so over and above anything that anybody could ever imagine. Not to mention the lack of support from, city planning and all of those parts and pieces, that it might help to give you a more realistic and current number.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. Also an Eastern Washington person joining in from sunny Yakima today. I think that you highlight a couple key points in making sure that we outline the cost throughout the state and get real-time data, and just to re-echo the comments that kind of repeat, getting that real-time data and anticipating that real-time data in the future so we can work ahead is something that continues. So thank you, and thank you for the offer.
You're welcome. The pre-COVID costs were unbelievably, like probably 35% less than the current cost of construction. And so it's been a real challenge. I mean, I don't know where it's all going to come from, but we'll figure it out.
Okay, well, thanks to Matt, thanks to Jason for coming. Lots of good discussion today. We are gonna have a discussion during lunch, and then we'll come back at 12:30. So we're just gonna ask for community engagement to move all of the providers into a breakout room so that, and we have a Jamboard. Okay, for the breakout room.
And I'm open to that. Julie, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like some of the things I heard from colleagues on this, though, is that may not be the most useful. So I would just encourage you all to maybe think about that a little bit, and then I'm happy to facilitate or, to reach out to Samantha and see if that works. I just heard some mixed opinions about whether that would be useful or not. Knowing
right, because there was some sentiment that it's at the district level.
Yep.
But if OSPI is able to see a way to regulating their districts, that would be helpful. Maybe we could, invite the sponsors of the bill onto that meeting. I'm not sure. I just think anytime that there's a topic that is so important to providers, I think it should be discussed, more and openly, and more people should be invited to the conversation. That's a good question. What can we do to get CPS to join? We weren't going to have CPS today with Travis. I guess they had declined.
If you would like to make that like a prerequisite for adding that to the April meeting, we can do that.
Right. But what do we do to get them to actually come?
So I'll connect with, I'm going to connect with Travis when he's back in the office. And I actually do have a check-in meeting with Travis and Eliza about some just kind of the TLS recommendations and things like that. So I can bring it up in that conversation too, and just try to get some names down so that maybe it would be easier if I just connect directly with somebody from CPS and get them kind of looped in. So I'll bring that up in our check-in next week. And then if we want to just kind of make that a requirement for the agenda, that if that item is going to be included on the agenda, it will include both licensing and CPS. And we can do that.
Can I ask a clarifying question about that? Julie, sorry for jumping in, but is there a reason that CPS wouldn't want to be on this call?
I believe the answer that was given was that they've already done a presentation. We've already had the slides and they would just be returning to do the same, which doesn't make sense because we do have a lot of questions, comments, things that have come up that we would like to, and questions were submitted to them. So I don't know, Susie. I would like to request that we have a backup person on scheduled in the future so that we don't get canceled on day of. If Travis is sick, I think Judy Bunkeman would be a good one to have. Maybe that's the wrong person, but it seems like maybe she's the one that could be the backup if Travis can't come. I don't know.
So Julie, I was typing this, but I'm just wondering, as far as that representation, what about the licensing supervisor who is in charge of staff who do the licensing side of investigating CPS reports? Because, you know, we have the CPS person comes out and then the licensing CPS investigator comes out, and they would at least be able to they should be able to answer some of these questions because they connect with CPS all the time. So
the one that's been invited was from the licensing department, the CPS within licensing. And honestly, it'd be nice to have both the licensing CPS person and an outside CPS person. You're right on that.
Yeah, so that was just my suggestion. Thank you.
Julie.
Yeah, and if anybody knows who that would be, I don't know who that would be.
I feel like that if they are so connected to us when these complaints come in, that we need to know who our representatives are in our area, just like a licensor. We know exactly who our licensor is, so we need to know who our CPS person is, so we can, one, communicate with them maybe more positively, not just with complaints, but bounce things off of our local representatives. My daycare is actually right across from DCYF in Bremerton for that branch of licensors and CPS, and I have no clue who's over there. Literally, I could walk right across the road into their offices. So I feel like they need to update us on who is in our local offices.
Yeah, we've been asking for this, it feels like, for about a year. I would think it would have been great, and they still could, if licensing would pick up the ball and say, let's just have a meeting with all the licensors and all the CPS people so that everybody can listen to the discussion. And we're going to plan it through community engagement to coordinate and make sure it's on a day of, we're on the agenda for provider supports or something like that. Like, bring everybody. licensing, just they feel like a
Is it
separate
another
entity.
inequity with the public schools, because the public schools are not investigated by CPS ever.
No, they are not. Yeah.
I will say that's one of my biggest frustration. I mean, not one of, but it is a big frustration for me that we are held to such a different higher standard than school teachers. That they're not investigated. I mean, I have my assistant director's daughter is literally getting death threats at school. The teachers are ignoring her on the playground and watching her being jumped on the playground, doing nothing about it. And we have no one to report it to. Like no one. Her mom went to OSPI and they're just like, well, sorry, there's nothing we can do about it. And it's just like, yet if it were happening to us, we'd have CPS here, we'd have licensing here, we'd have all
paper.
Yeah, right.
Like
Like
paper. I mean, just look at the isolation and restraint that's happening in the public school system, and it's not in the paper.
Oh my
Right.
gosh, yeah. One of my kiddos went off to kindergarten. This was a couple of years ago, and they still had a couple of kids enrolled with me, but we heard the story from mom about how he was in an isolation room. He tried to strangle himself while he was in there. They didn't have to do anything except investigate internally, which where's the accountability there, but if somebody, who knows, sprains their arm, goes to the doctor, I'm supposed to call, and then CPS can get involved.
Julie, I went
crazy.
to pick up my granddaughter from kindergarten, and the teacher says, well, she's not here. Her dad picked her up. And I said, no, her dad told me to pick her up. Oh, are you sure? Because I think, I'm like, you don't know who you released her to? Well, so we're looking all around. We're looking all around. Auntie of another child had come and they just let her go with that person. Nothing happened. I'm like, if that would have happened to us, that we would have let a child out of our building with some random strange person.
Yeah, because it feels like they put the burden on the child to go with the right person. And then we're with TK, now it'll be the 4-year-olds and pretty soon the 3-year-olds. And yeah, Jen, we would be shut down.
So Julie and team, I just wanted to clarify, it sounds like y'all have submitted some asks to licensing though around what you want to hear from them around this topic, right? Okay.
Yes. Well, Erin would have to speak to that, but yeah, we've had a lot of meetings. We've discussed this several times. We haven't been able to get them to come back. And I'm not sure if the right folks have been invited. It feels like we need to invite more people. So
Travis did present this to TLS. So there's some crossover between who participated in the TLS and here, but this topic has never been formally brought to provider supports. It's kind of been discussed tangentially when they have Travis in the room. And then just like some context is, this has been on the provider supports agenda twice, and now today makes twice in a row that it was canceled kind of last minute. I mean, people get sick, that happens, but it's just kind of unfortunate that this particular topic has been really tricky for us to get in front of the committee.
And a cancellation wouldn't be that big of a deal if we were expecting a large number of people from each part of the agency to come and speak to those things. Okay, make sure you guys are filling out the Menti since there's only 2 comments that have been submitted so far. It's in the chat, the Menti link. I mean, I haven't entered anything because I totally agree and want to focus on CPS getting here. But I think we've learned today that TK needs to be brought sooner with more folks at that conversation. if that's something we can do. Otherwise, I think we're done. Katie, do you have comments?
I mean, just the same, that it's just bizarre that nobody from CPS wants to be, I mean, and it's not a negative thing. We just want to talk to them. We just want some answers. Like, you know, we don't know who's in charge, who's there, who's anything.
I'd also like to know procedures, because we have schools that have called CPS before and they've come in and been less than helpful, and it's partnering and trying to keep kids safe.
Yeah.
And there's this dynamic where it's not transparent, so we're not sure what to expect. So then we're almost on the defense of like, well, it wasn't actually me I was calling about, right? The other thing I want to be careful is that OSPI does not care about the TK problem. It's not a problem to them. They're excited about it. They want more of it. The governor likes it. It's moving forward. So if we are struggling with TK in a way that we want changed, we're going to have to propose something that is a different way forward, because we're not stopping TK. It's going to grow and grow and grow. We can ask for some like requirements for them, but they're never going to have to worry about where their broom is. No public school teacher would let the government tell them where a broom is. And so I think we have to think about what we want to propose as opposed to complain at, right? Because I through this conversation, I've heard a lot of great information about sort of the impact of it. So we can talk about the impact, but I think we need a plan for what we're actually asking for.
I agree with Susie. I think we've gone around this issue a lot, but at this point, I feel like we need to have some sort of plan and action. And if they're not going to take steps, I mean, for me, where schools don't have to, especially for 4-year-olds, right? If they aren't having to follow these same rules, they don't have CPS called on them, then we shouldn't have CPS called on them. We are educators as well. So either we are lumped in with school teachers and we are all educators, or we are something different and they need to actually acknowledge that. And at this point, we either need to, we present, this is what we want, and then we take further action if we don't get it. And I'm hesitant to say what any of that further action would be at this time, but as providers, we take further action and say, this is what's going to happen if we don't have some sort of meeting, some sort of progress. These are kids that are 4 years old, 5 years old, that need to be set up for success, not put into having, and I'm not saying every transitional kindergarten is bad. Honestly, I'm not trying to put that down, but if there's not these rules in place that we have to follow, why is there a double standard for that? We should not be put forth as businesses, as professional people that have, I know I've been in this field since 1999. I've seen quite a lot. Having people telling me that, oh, well, I could just go work at this elementary school and I don't have to follow any of these rules. So then we're going to lose all of our staff, because why would they stay here with us if they can go work at an elementary school and not have to deal with half the crap we have to deal with? So, there has to be some sort of plan being put into place at this point for us of what are we going to do next if they will not listen anymore, if they won't, other than us continuing to say, these are our complaints, what then is the next step?
Yeah, we're the only ones that will be unhappy to lose staff to K-12. Everybody else will be thrilled.
Just like they took our kindergarten staff. Well, you can look towards California. They're in it right now. And I have provider friends who said it just completely ruined their businesses, shut them down. California is, now they're trying to do a course correction, but they've ruined the businesses now. So I don't know why Washington State wants to follow that road path. I for the life of me. Colorado is doing something different. It's more proactive. It's more inclusive. They're working as a team. I don't get it why we seem to want to go down a failed path of California and Texas. I don't get it. And if anybody can speak to anything, I think we should be able to say that. I was on a call yesterday and we were saying we're going to try to get some California folks to come up and testify, because we have an example. So what we're saying, we all know instinctively in our gut, but we have a real example. California did it and it's disastrous. So we already have an example of how terrible this can be. There's no reason for us to follow it.
Angie, I like that. I was just trying to see if I could find when the next hearings are going to be scheduled. It would be nice if we could get some people outside of the state who've gone through it to testify. And at least they've got some data that Washington State does not have.
Yeah, we don't have to be blind. We don't have to just say, we really are trying to figure out what we don't have to do that. We can see California example. We can see Colorado is reshaping theirs. We don't have to do this.
That's so wise. And I think yesterday I was at a hearing where they struggled to decide whether or not out-of-state person could testify. So I don't know what the rules are around that, but before we invite anybody, but it doesn't, I'm just saying I don't know, but I did hear something yesterday. But I think that getting the information from those two states alone could help frame the conversation differently, because they're very different. Colorado seems to have a good program.
If they're different, I mean, just if we can't get somebody to testify, does anybody have any documents that correlate with what we would want to propose from California or Colorado? Maybe.
We can try to get that for you. There's another group that's working on this exact angle. They're trying to put a little video together to show the California version versus the Colorado version in a quick, easy, video presentation. So I'll let you know when that gets together.
That would be awesome. I mean, testifying, in person is wonderful, but just to even show them, okay, this is what another state is doing. This is what is working between providers in the state. I'm sure that I don't know. I don't even know what they do up there. I was up there testifying in it last week, and we have brand new legislators that have no clue about early learning. They don't even know. I talked to one senator locally, and he just got put in, what, 2 months ago, and he has 3 kids, and his wife stays home with them. So he has no clue about what childcare crisis and childcare needs are. So when we were talking to him, he was just like completely green to everything I was saying.
I'm going to go back to the comment about in that spirit about having a message and deciding how we want it to move forward. Each of us has a relationship with the legislator that's in our district. And if we could get the messaging, or as you suggested, the video or what have you, to make a point to legislators, that's helpful to them to understand sort of the dynamics of this situation. I feel like it's really easy to say, well, why wouldn't you put if we don't have if there's need and public schools can take them, why wouldn't you do that? And so there's a lot of education around why that may not be the best movement forward for our kiddos from 0 to 5. And I don't think we can assume that they should just know that. So once we get the messaging about what it is that we want to propose, it would be great for all of us to take that on.
So we've had a few people show up for the latter part of the agenda, but I want to let them know that licensing did cancel on us because Travis is sick today. So we are ending early. We're ending at 1. I think we're ready to wrap up. So we can give you all back a little bit of your day. Anybody with final comments?
I think it was a great morning. I think we learned a lot. I think we got a lot of information and some answers, and actually had informative DCYF peeps.
Okay, well, thanks for coming, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Julie, you had mentioned doing the providing a question. Where would I do that at?
Oh, there was a Menti link. If you wanted to put a question in there, the Menti link is usually live for at least the rest of the day, sometimes longer.
And Michelle, you can also, if there's anything that doesn't make it into the Menti, you can always email us. The community engagement team, I'm putting that email address in the chat, but you can always email us directly too, and we can throw it in there for you.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good suggestion that she had about towards Jason and Matt projecting forward when they're doing changes to subsidy based on market rate, because it's always behind. It's always behind.